Well, good morning. Good morning, everyone. This morning, I am speaking on the everyday bodhisattva, the everyday bodhisattva. And in Buddhism, a bodhisattva is one who is dedicated to seeking awakening, spiritual awakening. They want to awake to their true nature, but not just for themselves. They want to awaken to their true nature so that they embody compassion, so they embody loving kindness, so they embody empathetic joy, and so that they embody equanimity and embody all those things so as to be a blessing, so as to serve humanity and bring light and bring joy and bring inspiration and awakening to humanity. Those four qualities of loving kindness, compassion, joy, and equanimity in Buddhism are often called the four immeasurables. Sometimes they're called the four immeasurable minds. And when we imbibe those qualities and cultivate them and grow them, we naturally feel more connected to each other, more connected to love, and more connected to all of humanity. We feel our interconnection. You know, the heart's desire in every being is to be awake, is to be fully merged in love, is to know the truth of oneself. And you could say that the path of awakening is really moving from the small I, the more self-centered I and self-centered concern to an expansive concern for all life, because one feels oneself as all life, as all being, you could say, singular, one, the one without a second. And in the heart of a bodhisattva, the question that would arise with regularity wouldn't be so much what can I get out of this situation, but it would be instead, what can I contribute to make this situation better? What can I contribute today to make life better? What can I contribute just to make one person feel better, one person feel loved, one person feel that they've got a friend? You know, all of you, I feel like I'm preaching to the choir with this talk, you know, because you're all bodhisattvas. You know, if you're drawn to these unity teachings, if you're drawn to truth teachings, you're on the path of a bodhisattva. It might not be the Buddhist path where you've had a formal initiation into becoming a bodhisattva. But if you're dedicated to growing loving kindness, compassion, spiritual joy, and equanimity, you're on this path. And it is very much the path of the heart. It's the heart that wants to be a blessing, that just, in its purest intention, wants to be a blessing to all beings. One of my favorite Buddhist teachers, there are actually quite a few, but one of them is Norman Fisher. And he says that we are regular people doing regular things, but that we're also heroic bodhisattvas. And that this doesn't make us different from anyone else because everyone is a bodhisattva, that everyone has imagination and an infinite wish for the happiness and welfare of all beings, however much they may be out of touch with this aspiration. I love stories. I love stories about regular people doing heroic things, you know, without a second thought, you know, that it's just their innate goodness that responds to something that happens in life, you know, whatever life is bringing. And so I have a story. I have a really beautiful story to share with you. It's a story about something that happened just a few weeks ago on Christmas Eve. You probably saw the news of that the snowstorm they had in Buffalo. That was one that was a historic for Buffalo, a historic blizzard. And it was really kind of a once-in-a-lifetime blizzard they had. And on this particular Christmas Eve, with that blizzard and that whiteout happening, a woman named Shakira Autry, heard someone yelling. She heard some screams from outside. And she looked out her window and she saw a man stumbling through the snow and crying for help. And, out in the frigid cold. It was so incredibly cold. And so she got her boyfriend to go out and bring the man in, carry the man in. He was a man named Joe White, 64-year-old white man, developmentally disabled. And so, they brought him inside. And Shakira used a blow dryer to melt the ice off his frozen red and blistered frostbitten hands. And his pants and socks were frozen solid. They were completely stiff. She had to cut his frozen socks off. And she called 911, of course, right away. And she called emergency responders. She even called the National Guard. But no one came. No one could come because the storm was so extreme that even all the plows were stuck and all the ambulances were stuck all over the place. And there was a list. They told her, they would put her on the list. So poor Joe, he was extremely frostbitten and he was really weak. But he managed to remember his sister's phone number. And so Shakira called Joe's sister, Yvonne, and his sister said, it's a miracle that he even remembered my number. He mostly doesn't remember it. And so she knew at least where he was, but she couldn't get there. There's no way she could get there. So the moments went by, the hours went by, and Shakira was noticing that Joe, his hands and his body were changing fast and changing color, and she was really worried, and she didn't have any medical training, so she didn't really know what to do. She was looking online. She was able to get online to see what to do. And she got on Facebook and she pleaded for help and shared what was going on. And eventually, by Christmas night, her pleas were answered. And so that was like a whole 24 hours later. There was a video that she posted of her with a group of men taking Joe to the hospital. And she wrote, "I'm in a car with Joe and some nice Samaritans that came and snow plowed us out." And in an interview, Shakira shares that Joe slept in her house that night, Christmas Eve. And in the morning, Christmas morning, he asked if he could have pancakes. And she said, yes, of course, and she made him pancakes. And there's a photo of her in her pajamas feeding Joe pancakes because his hands were too frostbitten to feed himself. And so it's just such and Joe's doing fine. I mean, he's recovering. But it's just such a heartwarming story, this beautiful young African-American woman bringing in the 64-year-old white man into her home and saving his life, with all the other news we read about. I was just so like, these are the stories that we need to hear because they are happening everywhere. There are everyday bodhisattvas doing amazing things, simple things, it doesn't always have to be saving a life. But I was just so inspired by the way that she cared for him and that she found a way to get him help and get him to the hospital. Just what a big heart full of loving kindness and compassion. So the bodhisattva in Buddhism, it's a Sanskrit word. It's very much like the Good Samaritan in Christianity. It's such a similar teaching. The Good Samaritan story is I think, in my opinion, one of Jesus's most powerful teachings. And in the story, a man asked Jesus, how do I know eternal life? Or in other words, how do I become enlightened? And Jesus says that it's through love. And it's through such a degree of love that we take care of our neighbor as if they are our nearest and dearest. If one of our family members was out walking in a blizzard, we'd do everything we could to get them, right? To get to them and get them inside and take care of them. And so Jesus was saying, can we expand that kind of love to a wider circle, to keep letting that circle widen. So I thought, I would share the Good Samaritan story from Luke 10, 25, 37. On one occasion, a lawyer came forward to put this question to him: Master, what must I do to inherit eternal life? And Jesus answered, what is written in the law? What's your reading of it? And the lawyer replied, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, and with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself. That's the right answer, Jesus said. Do that, and you will know eternal life. But the lawyer wanted to vindicate himself. So he said to Jesus, and who is my neighbor? Who's my neighbor? Jesus replied, a man was on his way from Jerusalem down to Jericho when he fell in with robbers who stripped him, beat him, and went off, leaving him half dead. It so happened that a priest was going down by the road, but when he saw him, he went past on the other side. So too, a Levite came to the place, and when he saw him, he went past on the other side. But a Samaritan who was making the journey came upon him, and when he saw him, he was moved to pity. And he went up, he bandaged his wounds, bathing them with oil and wine. Then he lifted him onto his own beast, brought him to an inn, and looked after him there. Next day, he produced 2 silver pieces and gave them to the innkeeper and said, look after him, and if you spend any more, I'll repay you on my way back. Which of these 3 do you think was neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of the robbers? The lawyer answered, the one who showed him kindness. And then Jesus said, go and do as he did. Go and do as he did. So many teachings from all the masters, from Jesus, from the Buddha, from Lao Tzu, from Krishna, from Amma, they're all teachings on what compassion and love look like in everyday actions. It reminds me of another story. Many of you know I've toured with Amma for like 20 years, and in touring with her, I saw so many instances of her kind of teaching us through her actions, through taking care of often marginalized people. I mean, all people, but also, kind of the people that were often forgotten by others. There was this one man named Datan. He had leprosy. And this was many, many years ago in India, and he came to see Amma in India. And, he had so many open sores that it smelled really bad, and people were, kind of repulsed by it. But Amma said, no, I want to see Datan. I want to embrace him. So let him come, but, he can come at the end. So at the end of darshan, he would come up to her, and she'd spend a lot of time with him. And, she would even ask for water and a cloth, and she would bathe his sores. She'd get a clean cloth, and she would bathe his sores. And it was really amazing to behold. And such a powerful teaching on caring for all beings, and even those that we might feel an aversion to. I was reading Pope Francis's Christmas message this year, and he said something that's just so fits in along these lines. He said, we cannot be indifferent to suffering. We cannot allow anyone to go through life as an outcast. Instead, we should feel indignant, challenged to emerge from our comfortable isolation, to be changed by our contact with human suffering. Yeah, another one of my favorite authors that I was introduced to in seminary is Marcus Borg. He's a wonderful writer, and he wrote, God wills our liberation, our enlightenment, our seeing. God wills that we see ourselves as God's beloved. God wills comprehensively our well-being, and not just my well-being as an individual, but the well-being of all of us and of the whole of creation. In short, God wills our salvation, our healing here on earth. So let's just let that in for a minute. God wills that we see ourselves as the beloved, as God's beloved, as creation's beloved. We are, each of us, creation's beloved. And God wills that the well-being of the whole of creation, all of creation, and, it's God in us, it's our love and action that brings about greater well-being for the whole of creation. In this world, with our lives as busy as they are, as demanding as they are, it takes courage. It takes living in balance, and it takes courage to rise from, I think, a kind of collective complacency and give voice to what needs changing here. There's a lot, so we have to balance, our service with self-care. But to speak out, when we see injustice, when we see inequality, when we see racism or sexism or prejudice of any kind. Marcus Borg, in his writing, he doesn't hesitate to call out hypocrisy when he sees it. He wrote, part of the scandal of American Christianity is that statistically the U.S. is the most Christian country in the world. And yet, as a country, we have the greatest income inequality in the world. It's interesting to look at that. I'm next Monday is Martin Luther King Jr. Day, and so I'm going to speak on his teachings and his inspiration and his work to transform inequality and racism. What a bodhisattva he was. And then there's also speaking out for animals that don't have a voice. And there's speaking out for the earth, speaking out to protect our environment. That's part of the well-being of the whole of creation. And I know many of you are involved in this work. It reminds me of one of my songs, send your love to the waters, that our rivers flow again clean. Send your love to the oceans, to the creatures of the sea. Send your love to the forests that are falling far too fast. Send your love to the planet as she gives us all she has. I've always felt, that if my Dharma wasn't so fully, obviously, to be a musician and a minister, that I would have liked to have been an environmental lawyer. If I had a twin, I'd have her doing that. I do get involved in environmental activism, when I can, especially when something's happening that I just can't bear. But to fight to preserve our natural habitat, that's another kind of bodhisattva work. I was reading an article in, I think, Lion's Roar about a man named James Thornton. He's a Zen priest, and he's also an environmental lawyer. And he founded the environmental law organization called Client Earth. And he has a team of over 100 people, and they use litigation to address climate change and biodiversity protection and habitat loss and deforestation and air pollution. And when you read about Thornton's spiritual journey, it's fascinating. He shares, that earlier in his life he felt pretty aimless, and he was directionless, and he just felt tired with life. And then he stumbled on to Zen Buddhism, Soto Zen, and he moved to LA and he studied with a Roshi. And through his meditation practice, he realized that environmental law allowed him to practice the Bodhisattva vow. He took that vow, and it's the vow to save all sentient beings. And he found meaning, great meaning in his work. He writes, the way I think about it is that the earth is our client. The earth is our client, and the lawyer needs to speak to the client. And by studying science, we know what the earth needs in terms of protection. And then we investigate how to turn that into policy by writing and implementing and enforcing the laws. One of the cases he recently won, it had been in litigation for years, was against illegal logging by the Polish government. And the outcome was that the European Union issued a logging ban on the Białowieża forest. It's hard to say, Białowieża forest in Poland, but I looked at pictures of it, and it is spectacular. I want to go there. It's one of the last great primeval forests. So, I just thank this Bodhisattva, James Thornton, for putting his compassion into action and saving those forests so we can still go see them. He teaches classes on environmental activism, and he talks about the importance of balancing our activism, whatever it is, however we're being, an activist, with our self-care, right? He wrote that one becomes very dedicated and the work is boundless. So there's a tendency to go beyond what is healthy for your system. So what the spiritual practice allows you to do is realize that you need to nurture yourself while you're taking care of everything else. And this is something we're all working on. Like, here at Unity, even on the council, we're learning how to serve our, spiritual community and balance it with taking care of ourselves. This very sped up world is asking us to find that way. It's like our body and our mind and our heart, we're an ecosystem. And so we have to take care of our own environment to bless and do greater good. So, I love sharing stories of everyday bodhisattvas with you. I know you can tell me stories. I know stories of you all, and I would love to hear more. We each do our part in a balanced way. It's the middle pathway where we nurture ourselves, but we also, I think we can also stretch a little more to expand beyond our own life and love a little wider, right? Share our compassion a little wider. Mother Teresa, I know I've quoted it before, but it's a quote that hangs above my stove. We cannot do great things in this world. We can only do small things with great love. And there's greatness in that. I created a New Year's affirmation I'd like to share with you. You might want it to be one of your affirmations. I live in a way that makes a positive difference each day. Maybe we could repeat that together. I live in a way that makes a positive difference each day. There's a journaling practice, a spiritual practice that I would suggest. Maybe you already do journaling as a practice, but I was reading about writing a compassion journal as a practice. And basically each day you write in your compassion journal and you answer 2 questions. And the first question is, in what ways was I compassionate with myself today? And the second question, how did I ease someone else's suffering today? So I would love it if you would just choose one of those questions and answer it in the chat. Any of you who feel inspired to, that I can read it after service. We can maybe talk about it after service. The first question, in what way was I compassionate with myself today? And the second, how did I ease someone else's suffering today? Yeah. Or it could be yesterday. I know we're just getting started today. But part of being a bodhisattva is being committed to just the simple resolve to do no harm, right? To basically live ethically in a conscious way. There's a quote from the Dalai Lama, if you can help others, if you can't do that, at least do no harm. Do no harm to them. Another Buddhist teaching is called the perfection of ethical conduct. And you could describe it as learning to live with skillful means, learning to live skillfully. And like Norman Fisher describes it as a joyful aspiration, because we feel good when we feel like we've met life skillfully, right? I was thinking about how sometimes when our traditional Christian upbringing, if that's what we've had, we might see morals like, the 10 Commandments as this uptight matter of restraint. I think sometimes it was mixed in with guilt and shame. And so there might be a part of us that has a bit of resistance to it. But Norman has a much more fresh view. He says that we can look at ethical conduct as a joyful path of doing what comes naturally out of the fullness of the heart, doing what comes naturally when the heart is full, when the heart is full, when it's all tuned up with love, with compassion. I know for me, when I'm kind, I feel better. When I walk through the park and I smile at everybody that walks by the end of the park, I'm just so full of joy. Loving kindness makes us feel better. So before I close, I just want to share, exactly what living ethically means. I want to share the Buddhist description. They have something called the 10 clear mind precepts. I love that, clear mind precepts. And this is how I think Norman wrote this list. I really like this because it's very contemporary. I vow to protect life, not to kill. I vow to receive gifts, not to steal. I vow to respect others, not to misuse sexuality. I vow to be truthful, not to lie. I vow to remain clear, not to intoxicate self or others. I vow to speak kindly, not to speak ill of others. I vow to practice modesty, not to praise self at the expense of others. I vow to practice generosity, not to be possessive of anything. I vow to practice loving kindness, not to harbor ill will. And I vow to cherish and polish the three treasures. And of course, in Buddhism, those three treasures are the three jewels, which are taking refuge in the spiritual teacher and teachings, and the spiritual path and the spiritual community. So, in closing, I invite you to contemplate all that has been shared today and explore what living in a skillful way means to you. We're each a mirror. We're each a mirror for each other. And when we mirror skillful means, skillful living, we give the gift of inspiration. Just like Shakira, she didn't help that man in that blizzard to become famous. She just followed her heart. She just listened to the promptings of her innate goodness. And every time any one of us does that in the smallest way, in the simplest way, we uplift one another. So thank you for your dedication to living your most beautiful life. You are a blessing. Each one of you are a blessing. And may your life just continue to bring endless blessings into this world in ways you haven't even imagined yet. May you and may all beings be at peace and be happy. Om Shanti.
Thank you, Kathy. As